It's time to get raw, nation. It's time to talk about a furious death grind assault from one of the bands that's legendary in the genre, one that is actually considered to be a very pivotal piece in the death grind puzzle. We're talking about Global Flatline, the 2012 album from Aborted. Now, Aborted is a band that throughout the past couple of albums, many people have said have kind of fallen off a little bit. Not to say that they are not a fantastic band any longer, or were a fantastic band any longer. They were still very, very good, but it just seemed that the raw intensity that was really captured on albums from the first part of the 2000s didn't seem to replicate itself on albums such as Slaughter and Apparatus and their previous effort prior to this one. However, with Global Flatline, they opted to go back to an old friend, Jacob Hansen, who is the producer, or was the producer, should I say, for their magnum opus, Gormageddon, The Saw and the Carnage Done, the 2003 album that was inspired by the Needle and the Damage Done, at least with the title, by Neil Young. Now, this not only happens to be one of my favorite albums by Aborted, but also one of my favorite albums in the entire genre. So, this is encouraging to me, and before I even started listening to this album, I immediately had visions of greatness of what this affair would be, truly believing that perhaps production had a lot to do with it. Was I right? Actually, yeah, it kind of was. Surprisingly enough, Global Flatline is just a torrid affair. It's something that just rips through you. It's a 15-track affair. It's a very, very lengthy track-wise ideal, but it clocks in at only 51 minutes in length, so you can tell that the death grind persona is still something that is infinitely present amongst this band. However, the sound just feels different. This is a band that sounds a lot more refreshed than they did on their previous two efforts, and it does resemble a little bit more along the lines of the Gormageddon era, which means that this is a gentleman that really seems to bring out that sound in the band. Although many, many curious listeners may actually ask, how is it all that different than what they've really output recently? Well, there's a certain raw, gory, just explicit element to that album that really has been unheard of ever since that album, the EP that happened right after that, and really, in my opinion, the Archaic Abattoir, which was released directly afterwards. Global Flatline is an exercise in just raw brutality. It's an exercise in really taking the idea of death grind and really not only fusing it together, but also kind of opening it up, almost like some sort of demented, gory flower. I know, it's a terrible metaphor for a death grind band, but it's the best way to put it. Mainly because whenever you think of death grind, you think of very quick songs, you think of very just brutal vocals, just ravaging guitar works, and just terrible blast beats. Well, you get that exercise here on Global Flatline, but at the same time you also get different exercises in pace. And pace is what is able to craft an album in being both brutal, but at the same time kind of haunting and very, very technically precise. Gormageddon was one that was done principally as an exercise in speed and ferocity and in just mental destruction. And that's something that Global Flatline does boast. However, there is a little bit more of a tendency to vary the pace up a little bit on this album, which some people may not like. Some people may actually think that that is what resembles a little bit more of their previous works, the previous two albums. But I really think that this is a good exercise that, when working with a gentleman that helped them produce arguably one of the best albums in the death grind genre, really helped them to really exercise this ideal with tremendous precision, and also kind of indoctrinate a philosophy within them that helped them create better, stronger music. Global Flatline, while it is going to be kind of a lengthy affair to some, is definitely an album that's worthy of investigation and is worthy of taking the full 51-minute ride, because this is an exercise in brutality. This is truly an endeavor in just violence, and that's something that Aborted is not unknown for. However, this is one that is done with a little bit more of a concreteness, a little bit more of an engaging usage to it. This is something that you can easily listen to free-flowingly without any necessity to jump around. There's no track on here that really feels weak, though there are a couple that maybe feel a little bit more along the lines of average as opposed to above average. This is an album that actually, for me, signals a return to form for Aborted and really shows them as still the reigning death grind gods. And every bit as viable and every bit as important as they were back with the release of Gormageddon in 2003 and previous albums with that. Because even with those albums where they were very, very rough and perhaps the band was still getting a little bit more of a deathy feel to them as opposed to really exposing that grind philosophy with albums such as Engineering the Dead, you're feeling with Global Flatline an overall embodiment. And that overall embodiment is just meticulously produced to create a nice whole. And whenever you have a nice whole like that, you actually get a pretty damn good album. This is an album that is not going to be an exercise in tediousness. Instead, it's going to be an album that's going to be an exercise in just how loud you want to crank this up before you can't take it anymore. And my recommendation is crank it up as loud as you want, because this is an album that's worthy of being cranked up. This is a solid 8.25 to an 8.5 out of 10. Definitely worthy to your collection, and if you've maybe kind of cooled off on Aborted throughout the past couple of years, throughout the past couple of efforts, perhaps ever since Slaughter and Apparatus, A Methodical Overture, give them another chance. Give them another opportunity, because Global Flatline is that exercise in brutality that you've been waiting for. And it's here in 2012, Cover Killer Nation. So definitely check this album out whenever it's released on the 24th of January, and I will see you guys next time. I had to kill a fucking lot of people to make this review. So you better be watching it till the fucking end.